Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your patience. And we're here tonight to listen to Giselle. We were just talking, and Giselle and I met some 20 years ago when she came into a session we were doing Women into High Performance Coaching with basically a baby. And I was like, wow, this woman can juggle all these things. Before that, she played for England. She was a Rugby World Cup winner in 1994. She's a level 4 coach. And she also coached Teddington, but I'm not going to say too much because I'm sure she might mention some of this, but she had a 63-game unbeaten run with Teddington men. And they got promotion 2 or 3 years running. She's now, as you can see there, director of rugby at Wasps Ladies. She'd had a previous stint there and had back-to-back wins in 2003 and 2004, if my research does me well. And so without further ado, I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to hand over to Giselle. Thanks, Giselle.
Thank you, Jane, and good evening, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay, yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about reflective practice. And how it connects with your culture and how you make it stay in what you're doing, rather than you just reflect and then the learning gets lost. So there I've got reflective practice is the ability to reflect on one's actions so as to engage in a process of continuous learning. And to be continuous learning, you have to be able to anchor that learning, because when you reflect, for example, on a session, then 2 days later you've got your next session, and then your next session, and then it can all disappear if you haven't found a way to anchor it. So that's kind of what I'm going to look at today. So just a little bit of theory first. The difference between reflection and reflective practice. So an important characteristic of reflective practice rather than reflection is the fact that it's captured and expressed in some form, either written, spoken, pictures, but on a systematic basis. And then once we've got that reflective learning that has taken place, how do you keep it alive and weave it into your coaching so it makes a genuine difference to your athlete team and keeps you evolving as a coach? And I think that's the biggest challenge of it. I think a lot of us will think about what we do and think about the session we've just done, but whether we can then anchor that learning. So there's 4 stages to the process, and all require your self-awareness to be on high alert. And I think that that's a major thing from a coach, is that the higher your self-awareness is, the quicker the learning can go in, the quicker you recognize various situations, the quicker you can see how your athletes are responding and what's working and what's not. And you know, to celebrate as well as to criticize yourself, because I think a lot of people sometimes see reflective practice as picking out the things that haven't gone so well, and actually sometimes it's better to pick out the things that went really well and make sure that you weave those into your fabric, and not just always worrying about the things that perhaps didn't go so well. So to re-inhabit the experience is the first, i.e. reliving it, to reflect on it and notice what was going on, review, critically analyze it, and then reframe and capture the new understanding. And that's what I want to spend a bit of time this evening looking at. So as I'm saying, how do you keep that learning alive when you're into your next session, your next match, your next season? And for me, I do describe coaching as chaos, because I'm looking after 40 athletes in my direct group and another 5 outside of that. There's umpteen members of staff that are not full-time, so you're dealing with managing staff as well. You've got the chaos of the sport that we play, which is rugby, and I'm sure that you have certain moments in lacrosse where, you know, the physicality of it, the injury side of it also needs a lot of management, and your athletes may not be full-time, nor are mine. So it is chaos, absolute chaos, to try and manage those situations. And then if you're trying to anchor the learning, if you haven't got a process set around it, then you can get lost, and the progress of your team or individual athlete is hampered. So what I want to do is just show you a few practical examples that we are using at Wasps, because I often find when I go on these things, the webinars and that, I'm after people giving me some examples of actual practice and how easy or difficult it may be, rather than just the theory. So that sort of sets the tone. So this here, all these pictures live around me all the time, okay? And they are all things that mean something to either me, my coaching team, my players, and they all are visible in everything that we're doing, and I add to it as the season goes. So this is the most up-to-date one so far of the 2020. The one at the very bottom right where it says body height momentum came in the last 2 weeks, and the +2 both sides of the ball came in at Christmas. The relationship where you can see the person carrying the ball and then the person with the steering wheel, that's the relationship between tempo and momentum. Okay, so these are areas that in our game, when we've reflected, we've gone, this is why things are going wrong. The players are trying to play too fast, or they've lost the speed that they should be playing at. So we had to really investigate that relationship. We recognized that it was an issue, and then from our reflection, and then we've got various things now, and the players will immediately go, relationship between tempo and momentum, because we've embedded that now in what we do. If you look up at number 1, that is from last year's learning that came in and has stayed with us in terms of how we're trying to organize it. So it's about getting there first. So you've got what we call the RSDCE. So the running to where you've got to get to, scanning and everything. Then you're deciding what you want to do. Then you've got to communicate. Then you've got to execute. And absolutely everything in our sport, and I would imagine in yours, follows that RSDCE sequence, every single thing. So if you're, from your point of view, whether you're going to pass to your left or to your right, you have to run to be in the position to do so. You have to scan and see what's going on. You have to make a decision around it. You are then communicating it to your teammates, and then you execute. And it's all very, very fast, but that sequence is going on all the time. And we recognized that we needed to coach the players to get there first. And I know that sounds perhaps a bit ridiculous, but everybody's coaching other stuff. But actually, if you get to where you've got to be to receive the pass or to give the pass or whatever it may be, then if you're there first, you've got a much higher time to then scan and see what you've got to do, to then make a decision, which hopefully the more time you've got, the more correct that decision is going to be, to communicate it to your teammates, and then to execute. So that was the sort of reflective learning there. And those little people are, all the players got a business card with that sequence on, and it was in their wallets, and that anchored the reflective learning straight away. So that's a piece of practice that we use. These little, if you go to number 2, the 3 people on the rope with 1 in gold. And then if you go to the other side, you've got the goal person either side. And basically what that's about is the no social loafing. Because if you are one person on the end of a rope and you've got to pull 3, the effort you put in is enormous. But if you're sitting behind the 3 and you're pulling on that rope, you feel you don't have to pull so hard because your teammates are there. Well, we identified that as something that individually players were putting in a lot of effort, but from a team point of view, if everyone put in the same amount of effort, we'd have at least a 10% gain in what we were doing. So that's another graphic that we have out and around us all the time. And there are lots of things on that are individual to us, but they are, and I'm happy to discuss any with you afterwards if you would like me to, but rather than go into each of them, those pictures are all have all come from reflective learning and then embedded in everything we do. So if I move on, now this is my session plan. So again, all these little pictures, when I am planning what I want to do with the squad, they are there right in front of me. So the little magic hat down on the left hand side, we want our players to turn their magic on, and you can see I've got that written there as well. We want them to express themselves individually, and it's something that we've developed with them. So if I shout magic, turn your magic on, they know instantly what I'm talking about. It's that individual moments. You can see my +2 in the middle there. That's come in very recently, where we want an extra effort either side of the ball when we're carrying. So obviously that's specific to my sport, but their things are there. So when I'm planning what we're going to be working on in that particular session, all of these things are there in front of me of what is in the DNA of my side. You can see that we've got key team learning and key unit learning. I fill those in on everyone, and the session intention is always filled in, which sets us up for a very good reflective learning afterwards. And then you can see at the bottom, the blue square is my session evaluation. And needs to be filled in, so that each time I'm actually thinking about what we've done in that session. My assistant coaches, we discuss, and then I make sure that I've got a record of everything that we're doing, so that we're anchoring that learning all the time and progressing the team and the individuals as fast as we can. So a simple thing to just put on to your session plan what it is that's important to you in terms of the learning, that wherever your team is at, and the reflective practice that you've got, that it just doesn't disappear. It's there in front of me every single time I'm making a session plan. Okay. Now this one is my game learning easels, and I'm not an artist. Okay, I'm not an artist, but this is I've just got 5 of them out for you. After every game, there is certain things that will come up from the game that the side did either very well, or the side we need to work on with the team. And just by, you can see I've got my wins in black and gold, because that's the colors we play in, and then I go to yellow and blue when we've lost, and I record the score. But then I also put the 3 main things that came out of the analysis from that game by both players and staff, and what has moved us forward. And by following that process, they're visual to me all the time. I've got all my easels all out on a little board that I can see all the time as to what we've visited, what have we forgotten, because sometimes you're working on a particular area, and then all of a sudden that problem that was there on the first one, for example, need challenging depth, may well resurface, and it's because we haven't revisited it. So you can see the progress that the team makes. And because of working in this way, my athletes are amazing at listening, at reflecting, and then going, right, this is what we need to do. We then design the session on the Tuesday night after a game that we feel we've identified these things, to bring those points out, and then the players are taking them onto the field on the weekend, which means that the improvement in the side has been really rapid, because of the processes of doing things like this. And therefore every single game, 3 points, sometimes 2, of the things that I'm wanting us to continue. And these little easels are little, and they're designed to be little, so I don't write pages and pages, because that loses my learning as well. I need little bullet points, but they're there in front of me all the time. I see them on a daily basis, and they're actually quite fun to make, to be fair, and I'm not an artist. Okay, this is our momentum chart. It's another way of anchoring it. So to me, this tells me exactly how my game runs. And if you look at the blue, right at the very first thing, the top half of it is what my team did, and the bottom half is what Exeter Chiefs did. The first box you can see is a restart. So, and it was collected, and then we had it for 2 phases and kicked back. So this, if you follow this through, it tells you everything that happened in the game, and I love having that all on one piece of paper. And then what I do is I scribble on it right above each thing that happened that was significant, and then I keep all my momentum charts, which give me again a real flavor for what my team is doing, and allows me to reflect really well on it, and can see pretty clearly where things have gone against us or not. So you can see where the rugby balls is where the tries were scored, and you can see what happened before it, and it's just a different way of looking at it, rather than just seeing everything actually at the players running. This gives me a much clearer picture of where my successes were, what certain things happened, and allows me to reflect through this tool, which is I use it consistently after every game. Okay, so this is players reflective practice. So every game they have to fill one of these out in our team meeting, and it's each player will do that. So this is last week's game, so the reflection bit hasn't happened yet, in the sense that because the players have had a couple of days off this week, because we've had 3 massively big games and we don't have a game this weekend, so I've given them a couple of days off. But tomorrow they'll re-look at this and refill out what their match day reflections were. So I'm getting my players to do reflective learning as well. This is what they wanted to achieve, what they need. So it says what their intention is, and that's what the A equals I is. Action equals intention, which is very much part of our culture. So players may say to me, Giselle, I want to play for my country. And I'm like, oh, do you? That's great. So what actions am I going to see that back up because like everybody might want to play for their country, but there's people that have to, there's a load of actions that have to happen, and we need to be at clubs seeing those actions visibly day in, day out. So if you want to play for your country, it's a 24/7 thing. And you know, we've highlighted the action is intention. You know, you're never going to achieve your intentions unless your actions match it. So you can see that it says what the match day intention is, and then what the actions they needed to display on the field are to match that intention. And then the athlete on this particular athlete will fill out her match day reflections on Thursday to say whether she felt she achieved that or not. So the players do this every week. You can see that we've got our cultural things of the social loafing and then the 2-1-2. And the 2-1-2 is actually woven into our shirts. I've got it on my kit here, the A equals I. I don't know if you can see it here. I don't know if you can see that up there. My A equals I there, and the 2-1-2 is on my kit. It's on the playing shirts. So we weave our cultural fabric in as well to literally to our fabric. And the 2-1-2 is the at 212 degrees Fahrenheit hot water boils and becomes steam, and steam can power a locomotive. Whereas at 211, it's just hot. So it's that extra degree that can make all the difference. And it's a huge part of culturally of what we do and have been doing this year. So that's another way that players, that we bring reflective practice in, by making the players do it. This is another one, the players' reflection. So I asked them those 3 questions on the left-hand side via WhatsApp, put it out on all our groups. So what changed at 20 minutes in when we had just scored our 4th try in 20 minutes and were 22-7 up? What do you feel were the critical moments in the match, and how did we respond? And if you had the time again, what would you do differently and why? And then this is one player's response. I get responses from all the players, but you can see that they've really reflected on why they felt that, you know, we were flying. We were 22-7 up and we ended up losing the blasted game. So that's just one of those things. But I want to know what the players feel, what they felt that their key moments were, and what would they do differently. And as you can see there, just on a WhatsApp text, a lot of things have come out. Some players are very bullet points, some players a little bit more detail, and some send me half an essay on WhatsApp. But that means they're reflecting. It also helps me with my reflection, because I wasn't out on the field, I was watching it. They were out on the field, and having them part of our reflective process every week is really, really important. And this is the responses that we're getting by doing this. And then this is about looking after you. In my diary, and it looks very scribbled here, and it is, but in my diary, I use different colours for different things. So the important thing about looking after you, the purple is me. And yes, some of it is kind of work related, because you can see it was a rugby writers dinner that I had to attend. So it was a lot of fun, but it was a work type-ish thing. But it's making sure that if I don't see enough purple on my week, then I'm not looking after me. And if I don't look after me, I can't look after everybody else. There are lots of weeks where the purple doesn't show, and that isn't a good thing. But by having different colours for different things, you get just a quick blast look, reflective look at going, well, am I doing what I should be doing? Have I got enough balance in life? Have I got enough balance of work? Have I got enough balance of all the other things? And just by having a colour-coded diary for certain things helps me to reflect very, very quickly at how balanced or unbalanced my current situation is. And I think that's hugely important in the coaching world, because you can spend every minute of every day looking after everybody else. And then if you don't get some parts right around balance with you, your family, whatever, your friends, then I think you lose perspective on other stuff. So that's a lot of ideas, and I think it would be really nice now if we can actually discuss it. But what I've said is reflective practice rather than reflection is the fact that it's captured and expressed in some form. And I see that as, for learning to stay alive and become a better form of what was there before, it has to be seen, used, referred to constantly, so that under pressure it survives. Because if it's not part of who we are, then it doesn't survive once the game commences, because under pressure the players resort to what they know, and to get learning in and to get development and what have you, it has to be around them and stay very much alive. Do we have any discussions and questions? So short and sharp, but lots of different things for people to think about.
That's great, Giselle. You know, there's so much there. So I don't mind, folks, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, then please do. If you want to write a question in the text box. So Martha, would you like to ask your first question?
And it would be lovely to see some faces if that's okay. If
Yeah,
you don't mind I'd love to see people's faces. Just gets a better conversation if that's okay with everyone.
You're on mute, Martha.
Need to unmute, that's it.
Yeah, there's always one, and it was me today. Yeah, sorry, just home from work. I really enjoyed your presentation, but I wanted to ask you, how did you get your players to follow this practice? How did you build their skill set to not just give you that surface, yeah, thought it was good, and actually go deeper into what you were asking from them to really kind of embrace the process? Because it makes you very vulnerable, doesn't it? So how did you help them get there?
That's a really good question, and I think that is where it really weaves into your culture, because we at Wasps we have a huge focus on our team culture and on everybody being part of that, on everybody having an opinion and being able to express what they think, either through the forums, but you know, when you're doing it on WhatsApp, that's just between me and the player. So that doesn't go out to the whole team. That's just them. You know, I send out the questions to the whole team, but I ask for the responses to come back individually to me, so that, you know, and then I try and comment on each and every one of them to feed back to them. So it's another opportunity, because it's incredibly difficult when you've only got a week's turnaround and your athletes aren't full time to get that individual feedback to them. So when they write those things out, I can then quickly come back with some individual feedback. We do a lot of work on in the pre-season on how we're going to work. So for example, we do things like speed feedback, where I have two rows of chairs, and one row doesn't move, the other will move progressively further down. They have 30 seconds, whatever the question may be. So, you know, 30 seconds to say to someone what they think they're doing really well and why they're doing well. And then you have no right of reply, you just have to listen. And then you have 30 seconds where they tell you things that they think you could improve on and make a big difference to the team. And then again, you have no right of reply. And then you swap over. And so you've each given each other 30 seconds feedback of real positive stuff and then work-ons, but you are not allowed to go, oh, but that's because, or I do this because of this. And none of these reasons or excuses or anything. You just have to say thank you at the end of it. You have to say thank you, and then we move on down. And literally I time it, you've got 30 seconds. So by doing something like that, you train your athletes to be open, to be positive about feedback. I think a lot of athletes as well they crave that kind of feedback, because they are, you know, they want to improve. That's why they're there. And they actually really crave very direct, very honest feedback. Yes, you've got to be sensitive with it, but and always after one of those sessions, I always say, look, if there's anybody who's had anything that's come up that you're not comfortable with, please come find me and come talk to me about it. So the usual thing that happens is there's a theme develops, because if you've got 10 pieces of feedback and 8 people have said the same thing to you, then you kind of think, okay, I've got something that I've got to go work on. And it's very powerful, and it's come from your teammates, and and that usually does happen. There is usually a theme that develops. So and doing things like that all the time are cultural things. The players are very, you know, when we do our feedback on games, we're very open and honest. It's not anybody's fault that we lost a game. It's all of us. But some people might have done something at a certain time that they need to be. And if you don't make them aware, then you're not being fair on the athlete, because they're likely to make the same mistake the following week, and they don't realize they're making it. So whilst it's what I would call courageous conversations, but courageous conversations lead for a really fantastic environment with fabulous reflective practice going on.
Emily, you first, and then we'll go to Rick. So Emily, if you'd like to ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering, also, I thought it was brilliant. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time. So just wondering how much you differentiate your sort of expectations of the reflection depending on the different personalities. I'm just interested to know, how much you sort of, really know what your players are going to give you, because they're all going to be so different. And
Yeah,
how you...
I think it depends on the journey that they're on. So like the really experienced players, and I'm very fortunate to work with some international athletes, the very experienced players are, their in-depth analysis and their reflections are huge. Whereas my new players to this might just give me like 2 or 3 lines. So I ask another question. I just come back with another question to try and dig a little bit deeper. So it's all on WhatsApp. So it's not threatening. It's not anything. If we've got to a stage where we really need to sit down and one-to-one stuff, then we'll do that conversation wise. But by just asking another question, I say, yeah, I really agree with that. What did you mean by this? Then they have to go a bit deeper. And just by bringing that in, and I think, again, one of the biggest things for me as a coach is knowing the whole athlete. I'm not just coaching rugby players, I'm coaching human beings who happen to be rugby players. So that to me is hugely important, that I am very aware about which players will highly likely come back with a whole reference of stuff. And also some of them will come back and there's not a lot of self-accountability. And I know that's coming too. So then I have to go back and go, so where did you influence that? Or how did you influence that? And other times there's so much accountability that I have to sort of say, so did your teammates have anything around this? They're taking so much on their shoulders. And I think, as you rightly say, each one of them is individual. And what I get back, I respond to individually, which is why I ask them to send it just to me, not on the main groups, so that we can be very individual in how we respond.
Thank you.
Rick, I can't decide if you're cycling or running there, but
I'm cycling. I'm on the turbo.
That's impressive.
Oh, you're going like
use of time.
I've stopped it now because it's very noisy. Hi.
Hi.
Question: how do you, as a coaching team and with the players, reflect on selection and substitutions?
Fantastic question. Fantastic. Selection wise is we have a process around it that all players who have changed status, i.e. been moved from starting team to bench or bench not in the side, or so that we get some nice phone calls, bench to first, to starting, we phone every week individually. One or the other of the coaching team will phone them every week. The captain is a huge point for us to say, how is the squad feeling? How is the squad responding? We have a cultural group. I don't call them it's not to do with the game. We have a cultural group of 7 players, all of which come from, so one is a brand new player to the squad. One is an international. I've got 1 Irish player because I have 4 Irish internationals in my side. I've got one who's a sevens player because I've got 5 sevens players in my side as well. So we've got representations from all the group, and we go to them to say, what's the feeling like? But I will say that I perceive selection every week to be a cultural hand grenade, and we release it into the squad every week, and there will always be fallout. Never had one which isn't. There is always an explosion somewhere, which is why we make these phone calls, to preempt, to explain to everyone how, why these things have been done. We give as truthful as we possibly can, so that because I believe if you try and sugar it too much, then it blows up in your face later on in the season. You have to be really honest and really direct, but there's always a 24-hour effect of a cultural hand grenade.
So just interested, a post game, how do you manage that?
Post game in terms of
your selection and your substitutions.
So on the actual substitutions, when we're going through the game afterwards in our reflection, we look at whether, so for example, 3 weeks ago, we substituted our scrum half about 15-20 minutes into the second half, and we all acknowledged afterwards that when watching the tape back, she'd blown up 5 or 6 minutes beforehand. So we should have done that substitution 5 or 6 minutes beforehand. The reflective learning piece was to watch her very closely after 10 minutes of the second half of the next game, so that we were able to see where she was at, because we usually have an international scrum half and she's injured. So this was the first time this player had to play so long, and we acknowledged that we hadn't got that one quite right. We look at, there's a lot of times where not all the substitutions will get on, and we have to look at why and then the nature of the game. But we go back through all of it and say, would this player have made a difference? Would this have made a difference? Did we put that player on too early? Did we put too many on too early? Because we got up to 8 substitutes, which with 15 on a field, that's half the side we can change. So we reflect on that quite a lot, but using the tape of the game to go back with as well.
Heather.
Hi, thanks so much. That's really amazing just to hear everything. I guess also just going off that last question, would you ask players who maybe didn't get any game time to also reflect, or?
They ask me to reflect. So in the last couple, I've had a player in particular who has said, I could have made a difference. I really feel I could have made a difference. So, and I said to you, there's no evidence that she couldn't, because I didn't put her on. So we discuss why I didn't put her on. And I explained to her what I felt was missing and what was coming at us, and whether I felt, and we're in a very big discussion phase around that and her development, which is, I think, a really, really healthy conversation, that the player is very happy to come and say to me, I could have made a difference and you didn't give me the opportunity. And I think that's really powerful. She also took the feedback really, really well and said, right, okay, I'm going to set about doing that. So I think those are fascinatingly powerful conversations. From the bench point of view, those questions I put out to the whole squad, whether you've played or not. So people who were in the squad but didn't get to play, and then people who didn't make the squad but have seen the game, are asked to fill those questions out, so that they have every opportunity there to say, but this player actually came and said that to me straight up, but that's fine. But others will say it through their communication on WhatsApp.
Great, thanks. I wonder if I could also ask, is there a particular time when you'd recommend doing the reflections? Do the players have access to the stats, to the video analysis and that, or? I
prefer the way that I've done it most recently is not to give them anything, just how did it feel? Just because reflection is about feelings. It's about how as soon as you give them a set of stats, you're influencing how they reflect. You can then do other reflection when the facts are out there, but to allow them the opportunity to reflect without all of that, I think is extraordinarily powerful, because you're actually hearing what the problems they felt they had out there and what things they felt were going really, really well. And that's the kind of learning that I really want to anchor. I've got all the stats. I know what we can see from the stats. The coaching team can read those. The players, that's information that's given to them, rather than them looking for that information from within. And to cope under pressure, you've got to be able to do it from within, not with a whole bunch of stats. So when this learning becomes anchored and is strong enough that it stands up under pressure, is because it's internalized, not external stuff coming to them. Does that make sense?
That's amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess they're all reflecting, sort of thinking about what the key points are as they've gone through. A lot of these people on here, some do have assistant coaches. A lot don't have assistant coaches. They're there by themselves. Mm-hmm. What would be the key points, would you say, from a reflection? Just what you've said to Heather, or how would you approach it if you were by yourself? Because you have a couple of assistant coaches, don't you?
I do. I think from my perspective, when I coached Teddington, I was on my own as a coach. I had people who did the fixtures and stuff, but I was on my own as a coach. I think your senior players are a huge point of reflection for you. You have, in my opinion, you have to pick your captain really, really carefully, because I think the captain can be a huge positive help to you if you're on your own, to get your messages across, to add to them, and to help you change behaviours. So, for example, with this group at Teddington, they were a group of guys who really enjoyed each other's company, but they liked a beer, definitely liked a beer, and yet they had the potential to be very, very good. And I managed to change their behaviours. So on Friday night they didn't drink before the game, and then at all, they wouldn't even have a couple, and they ended up actually going out together for food but not alcohol. Saturday night was a completely different ball game, and that was the sort of trade-off in it, and that was fine, because that was the reason they played, was to really enjoy each other's company. But that was the kind of behavioural change we could have, because the senior players and the skipper bought into the fact that it would significantly change things, and that they would get to know each other better if they went out on a Friday night without drinking, because they'll remember what each other had talked about, and that they would need to properly talk to each other to enjoy that Friday night. And the relationships between those players intensified beyond measure, because they actually got to know each other properly. And then they went wild on Saturdays, but that's fine, but with deeper understanding of each other's lives, and that transferred onto the pitch in how they played and how they wanted to work for each other. So it's the picking of and the messages that you send. Sending thousands of messages in one go never works. It's the odd, 2 or 3 things that you work on, and I tend to do things in a 6-week block. So there's 2 or 3 things that we pick up and we really work hard on for 6 weeks. Then it becomes part of the learning, becomes anchored, stands up under pressure. Then we can move on to the next 3 things. But there's things coming up all the time, but you've got to pick which ones you actually take, especially if you're on your own. You need to just say, right, I am going to do this for the next 6 weeks, and by the end of these 6 weeks my players will be doing this in competition, or my players will be behaving in different ways within this 6 weeks, either on or off the field. And if you really hammer something for 6 weeks and you get them to reflect on it, and you get them to see the differences, and you keep using the same terminology, you get change.
Yeah. Mr. Ball.
Thank you, Jane. I'm having a bit of trouble with the camera, so apologies, can't start. I've attempted it but missed off the screen. 2-parter, Giselle. Firstly, with game day coaching, are you quite on the sideline and you like to let the players lead, or how does that go? But before you answer that, your diary, Friday the 17th, I got sold. Explain.
Okay, that's my daughter. So she dances, and
Right.
she's a dancer. So that's the pink writing is my daughter.
Gotcha.
So but I needed to go. So her dance group is called I Got Soul, and I needed to go and attend a thing that she was dancing in that particular day.
Okay.
So that's all part of it. But and the fact that I use different colours for each of my children also helps me see whether the time that I'm spending with each,
Cool.
and making sure that is, is equated over a period of time. And I really find that the different colour inks in my diary is just so easy for me to look at things and get a quick flash opinion as to what's going on in my life and around my life and with work and everything. So that was that one. And then the question about me being quiet on the sideline, I'll say I'm getting better. I can be. In terms of what the players, I'm very, I shout really positive stuff to the players. So if they've done brilliantly, I'm shouting that out. I do get very affected by poor officiating. I'm sorry, but I do. I try and control that. But I have a real issue around us all working incredibly hard and then decisions changing. And because my game is that way, it's an interpretive rule book, or law book, should I say. And I'm on a massive campaign at the moment with my governing body to try and change all of that. So that's how passionate I am about it. But it's I'm getting better. Okay. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
I'm an emotional coach, so it comes out. That's how I coach a lot, through emotion, but with control, I'd like to think.
Excellent. Great answer. Thank you.
And just on that side of it, because often people will criticize women for being emotional. It's okay if you're a man and you're emotional and shouting and screaming, but if you're a woman, then have you ever had that scenario played out to you where people have criticized you because of your behavior emotionally?
Yes. I think it's that mixture between a man is assertive and a woman is aggressive. I think over a period of time, you weather that, you learn more, and it doesn't, if people are calling me that, I have to reflect to decide whether I have been aggressive or whether I've been assertive. And there will be moments, I guess, where you could perceive that, do you know what, I think I took that too far. And then I have to apologize. I'll go back and apologize. But most of the time, I feel that I am able to control that side of things. I'm passionate about the game. I'm passionate about my players and their development and the goals that they have. So when they arrive, I ask them what it is they want to achieve, and they're provided their A equals I, that their actions are matching their intentions, their goal becomes my goal, and therefore I'm very passionate about it. So and I don't apologize for that emotion, because I think emotion gives you a different level. Yes, it must be controlled. Yes, you shouldn't lose control of it, but at times showing your players that it matters to you, I think, is really important to them, and builds those relationships that are critical to progress.
Rick's put a reflective question in the chat box that says, would the players agree with that summary of your sideline style?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I call out a lot to them. I'm not critical on thing. Half time, if there's something that needs to be said, I'll say it, but I don't shout out criticism there. If I need to get a message on, I'll do it through the right channels, through the radios, and then down to the water carrier, and they'll give the messages on there. But and they will also uphold my refereeing situation. So yes, 100% they would.
That's definitely an advantage when you've got water carriers, because, you know, sometimes we like to get messages on, and the similarity between rugby and lacrosse, particularly the men's side of the game, is quite similar. So, but we don't have that opportunity of using a water carrier. So
well, our water carriers are sometimes even our substitutes, if we haven't got all players that have not been selected.
We're not allowed anybody on the pitch. Our officials are even more sort of rule book.
So how do you get hydrated in the game?
Who'd like to answer that? Tom, seeing as you coach the men's side, or Sam?
I think what's different for us, Giselle, is that we substitute on the fly, like ice hockey in the men's game. So you can come on and off multiple times. So there's not that same challenge with with hydration. And then, apologies, put my camera on. And then in terms of if we're ever playing in very hot conditions, they have hydration protocols and stop the game every 30 seconds. And it's, to be honest, becomes more of a hindrance than a help in terms of kind of the flow of play.
So do you get your coaching messages on via those substitutes as they come back on? You can send a message across through that way.
Absolutely, that's far and away, certainly in the men's game, the easiest way of doing it. And then probably similar to yourself, you'd have leaders on the field who kind of attuned with putting those messages into action. Whilst I'm on, could I ask a question? With all that reflective practice, I love that. There was so much to take away there, and I'm assuming that you're also creating environments where much of those sort of parameters that are implied by your cultural definitions, to what extent are you looking for the players to hold each other to account? And I'm assuming that you do, as opposed to you holding them to account. And if so, how do you engineer the environment to get them, improve them in those kind of areas?
I think when you are feeding back to players en masse, so we do our game analysis together as a group. So we the video doesn't lie. So by actually saying to them, look at this, why did we do this? And then you go to a direct player as to why did you do that? What did you see? What you know? And sometimes they'll come up with something that there's a, you know, really good reason as to why, and then everyone's like, yeah, okay, we get that. But you know, holding, but by being that accountable to each other in our analysis session, that breeds it, because it's, people are comfortable to go, well, yeah, that was me, my bad. And then it's like, okay, so how could we have helped you to do that? Or how could we have, so, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a game where our game management was shocking, right? So, and it was one of my most talented players was responsible for that. And she was fantastic. She just went, yeah, got it. You should have done this. I should have done that. I was this, I was that. The following week, she was unreal, absolutely unreal in how she managed the game. And the whole side responded to that massively, because they'd seen that she had held her hand up and gone, yeah, I didn't get this right. Then she went to the next stage and went, now look at this, and smashed it out the park. And others were helping her by reiterating the messages, because the message is there for the whole team, not just her. And we beat an opponent that we haven't beaten since 2018. So that was because we are accountable in those sessions, the players, there's still room for it. There's still room for better accountability in my squad, without question, without us leading it. So the conversations that players can have are getting stronger and stronger and stronger, without it being taken as, you know, a negative. And female athletes can sometimes be more sensitive around that from one to another. They don't want to tell someone that they haven't done what they wanted them to do. But we've kind of put it down to the fact that if you come off the field after 80 minutes and go, well, if you'd have done this, I might have been able to do this. Nobody wants to hear it. You want to hear it when you can do something about it. So that accountability during the game is getting better and better, without it being vicious, because players have got to realize that when you're at a heightened state and you're performing, you're not going to say, excuse me, would it be okay if you just pass the ball a little bit quicker or whatever. You don't say it like that, but neither do you say, fuck's sake, can you do this? Neither do you do that, do you? So it's getting that and acknowledging that and teaching them that and making that something that what is, and you know, one player may go, I cannot stand it when you say that to me. Okay, everyone, have you got that? Do you understand that? It doesn't help her. And we all get it and we all hear that. So then they say, okay, well, how do we feed that back to you? And then that player will respond. And it's those kind of things that deepen the relationships in a team. And the stuff that I was talking about earlier speeds that up, because our learning is constant and our learning is present. We can see it. We've got posters up, we've got pictures up, we've got little symbols that mean things. As I said, the business cards, we've got all these little things that constantly reinforce that. So having that freedom and the speed feedback. If I perceive that we've got a real issue, then the question that I'll put in front of them will go that issue, and then somebody can say, I hate it when you do that, and then it's like, oh, okay, fine, I didn't realize that. And nobody's doing it. I rarely think that anybody's doing anything to really upset another member of the group. They just don't have the self-awareness that they're upsetting them, or so we have to raise. And I think half to 3/4 of our jobs as coaches is about raising our athletes' self-awareness, either to a technique, which is something that's technical, about their emotional way of doing, the way they interact with others, how hard they work, or their perception of how hard they work, their perception of, you know, oh, but I have to keep doing this or doing this. No, you don't. You've done enough. You know, raising their awareness all the time. That's half to 3/4 of our job as coaches, I think.
Sorry, I'm not meaning to hog this, but something you've just said there, Giselle, really, really resonates. Do you have relationship with Wasps' talent process and the development of junior players in order to embed skills of self-reflection, self-awareness at a young age? Is it something that is really explicitly started with the younger players?
So we have a centre of excellence, which is 16 to 18-year-olds. They don't play for the club, but they come in for training 3 times in the month. And the head of the centre of excellence and I are often, you know, we have constant conversations. I would suggest that the self-reflection piece is mentioned there, but there's a lot of other things that they're working on. but it becomes much more when they move up to senior squad. But I think that's something that we can reflect on and do more with the youngsters, so that it is a much stronger pathway, and that they've been exposed to it much more. But because they don't actually play for us, they play in their club size and come into us, there's not so much effect you can have as much as you do when you're actually, because their skills, they're not put under pressure in competition. And that's when you know whether your skill is secure or not, is when it's in competition, isn't it? And you think, somebody said to me, how do you think you'll go this weekend? And I went, well, do you know what? I have no idea. Because of the 2 games that we had before, I said they could do this or they could do this. And, again, that's my self-awareness of knowing that my team could tip one way or the other, depending on certain factors. And yes, I need to get the more, that's the journey that we're on, is making us, and it's our belief system, because we haven't beaten all these big teams in the past. So it's our belief system that we are building all the time through reflective learning. This is why we did this. This is why we lost this, not because we're not good enough, but because we did this. Right, okay. And it's just the language you use and the way that you are in your reflection that, again, will build up that belief system.
Brilliant, thank you.
Giselle, just going to jump in there, because I totally agree with you. It's about self-reflection as the coach, but also getting your players to self-reflect. And I guess that as you get older, you do less, well, not less, but you're beginning to understand yourself more. But once you've reached a certain stage, do you think it really is 50-50, or do you think it's 80-20, sort of as you're going through your coaching? So we've got some very young coaches on here, and we've got some very experienced coaches. So should they be looking at their own self-reflection first before they then start getting the players to self-reflect, or is it 50-50?
That's a really good question. And again, I think that's down to the individual, because if you are a coach, or who does reflect and does pull out the things and then does a program on working on those things to anchor that learning, rather than dotting around all over the place, oh, this week it's this week it's that, this week it's the other, then if you're somebody who is quite does a lot of self-reflection anyway, then I think you need to look at your players. But like, I have some international rugby players, it isn't their skills that I need to it is their awareness of how they're interacting and how they're training, and how they become, obviously we had a World Cup that was just coming on, but it's just been postponed, and that's thrown a massive piece of reflection for everybody into what we're doing, because some of them are like, well, I've got to do this again for another year, I'm feeling fantastic now, I'm right where I need to be. So it's like, okay. And the others of them, I've said, look, don't be sad about it, because you've now got another year to be better at what you're doing. So we've got all sorts of things going on around that. But I think you need to raise the self-awareness, the self-reflection piece everywhere, because if you're going to do it, then you involve your players, because what my players send back to me on the WhatsApps can raise my reflection. I look at it and go, oh, okay, I didn't see it that way, because I'm watching the game, I'm not in the battle. And I think that's really important for coaches to, yes, we see things that our players don't see, but then they see things that we don't see, and they feel things that we don't feel because we're not out there. So the question that I asked, what changed in that 20 minutes? We were playing beautiful, what changed? Because I look at it and I think, okay, this is what I think changed, but what's coming back at me is very different in with some of them. So that's, I think it's a collective thing.
Giselle, we've come to the end of the hour, and I'm very aware that we could go on chatting all night, because that's one thing that coaches do well, is we like to share experience and share understanding and to develop our own learning. But thank you very much. I'm sure everybody's benefited from your experience and the way that you've communicated it. Some of the slides were very exciting, I thought, just to have a look at and be able to, I'd love to be able to question you a bit further on what the duck means, but I won't.
That's the ugly duckling. The ugly duckling.
The talk has been recorded, so somebody said, could they have a copy of the slides? Well, the talk's been recorded, so you may be able to have a re-look at some of that, those people that were interested in that. But just want to say thank you so much for giving us your time. Just looking at your diary, I feel a bit guilty because you are so busy, but you know, it's just quality every time that comes out of your mouth. So thank you so much for everything that you've given to us tonight. And thank you very much, everybody else, for your questions and for joining us tonight. And we look forward to meeting you at the next one, which I'm not sure when. Jason might be able to tell me. 10th of March, I think.
That's today.
Oh, that's today, 24th of March.